right, now we finally get into our first body system, which is the integumentary system. The skin, the hair, and the nails are a significant part of a physical exam. Skin is our most vulnerable organ as well as our most visible organ. The skin can be exposed to radiation, trauma, infection, chemicals. It gets more medical treatments than any other organ system. And if you study the medical treatment of the integumentary system, you are a dermatologist, as this falls under dermatology. The integumentary system consists of the skin, the hair, the nails, and associated glands. Those hair, nails, and glands are all derived from skin tissue. The skin, or the integument, is the body's largest and heaviest organ. It covers around 2 square meters, composes about 8% of your body weight. It comes in 2 layers: the outer epidermis, which is stratified squamous epithelium. The dermis, below that, is a connective tissue layer. And then there's another region called the hypodermis, which is not technically part of the skin, but it's not really part of anything else, so we usually lump it in here with the skin. And that would be the location that you are aiming for when you use a hypodermic needle. Skin ranges from about 0.5 to 6 millimeters thick. That range mainly due to variations in dermis thickness, but skin is classified as thick or thin based on the epidermis. Thick skin covers the palms, the soles, and corresponding surfaces of fingers and toes. It has sweat glands but no hair follicles or sebaceous glands. The epidermis about 0.5 millimeters thick, primarily due to the thick stratum corneum. Thin skin covers the rest of the body. It has hair follicles, sebaceous glands, and sweat glands. And its epidermis is about 0.1 millimeter thick. The skin is important for resistance to trauma and infections. Keratin, the protein that is found in the skin, provides a physical protection. There are also chemicals such as dermacidin, defensin, and even the acid mantle that help protect against bacterial growth. Skin is a very good barrier to water, keeps water out, but more importantly for us, it keeps water in. It's a good way to block ultraviolet rays, and harmful chemicals generally don't make it through the skin. It's a place where vitamin D gets synthesized, at least in the first step. There are lots of nerve endings that react with various stimuli in the skin. We can alter the blood flow to release or retain heat. We call that cutaneous vasoconstriction or cutaneous vasodilation. And we also use it for nonverbal communication, facial expressions. The epidermis in general, again, is keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. It includes dead cells at the skin surface packed with tough keratin protein. It is avascular, as we said last week. It depends on the diffusion of nutrients from the underlying connective tissue, the dermis. Contains sparse nerve endings for touch and pain. There are 5 types of epidermal cells. The vast majority are keratinocytes. They synthesize keratin. There are also stem cells, which are undifferentiated cells that give rise to keratinocytes. They are in the deepest layer of the epidermis, the stratum basale, also known as the stratum germinatum. There are melanocytes, which synthesize melanin, that dark pigment that shields from ultraviolet radiation. The melanocytes only occur in the stratum basale, but they have branch processes that spread out among the keratinocytes to distribute the melanin through vesicles called melanosomes. We have tactile cells, which are touch receptors. They are associated with the dermal fibers. They form a structure known as a tactile disc, and they are found in the basal layer of the epidermis. And there are dendritic cells, which are phagocytic immune cells similar to macrophages that guard against toxins, microbes. They can be found in the stratum spinosum and the stratum granulosum. Here are the layers, image of the layers of the skin, which I would encourage you to check out in your text and look closely. Depending on whether it's thick or thin skin, we have 4 to 5 zones or strata. We start at the deepest part. We have the stratum basale. The stratum basale is a layer of stem cells, and when those stem cells divide, one will become a keratinocyte, one will remain a stem cell. The keratinocyte will make its way up. There are also melanocytes and tactile cells in the stratum basale. Just above that is the stratum spinosum. That's several layers of living keratinocytes. They're still getting some nutrients from below. They're joined together by desmosomes and tight junctions. They have the appearance of a spiny structure when they are histologically prepared, giving them the spinosum name. There are also some dendritic cells within the stratum spinosum. Above that is the stratum granulosum. That's 3 to 5 layers of flat, living keratinocytes. They're cells containing dark staining keratohyalin granules. Above that, in thick skin, we have stratum lucidum, which is a thin, pale layer found only in thick skin. Here, the keratinocytes are packed with a clear protein, ellatin. And above that, for all layers of skin, are about 30 layers of dead, scaly, keratinized cells, which resist abrasion, penetration, and water loss. That would be the stratum corneum. Keratinocytes are produced by mitosis in the stratum basale, or the deepest part of the stratum spinosum. That mitosis requires oxygen and nutrients. Again, when the cell divides, one cell will remain as a stem cell. The cell that becomes a keratinocyte will go upward, and it will be out of the range of nutrients and oxygen to undergo mitosis. And that new keratinocyte will push the older ones towards the surface, and over time the keratinocytes flatten, produce more keratin and lipid-filled lamellar granules. In about 30 to 40 days, a keratinocyte makes its way to the skin surface and then exfoliates, sloughs off as specks called dander, which may be combined with oil in the hairs particularly to become dandruff. Keratinocyte multiplication is slower in old age, faster in injured or stressed cells. Calluses or corns are thick accumulations of dead keratinocytes on hands or feet. 4 important events occur in the stratum granulosum. Keratohyalin granules release filigrin, a protein that binds to keratin into tough bundles. Cells produce envelope proteins beneath their membranes. Membrane-coating vesicles release lipid mixtures that spread out over the cell surface and waterproofs it. And keratinocyte organelles degenerate and the cell dies, leaving a waterproof sac enclosing keratin bundles. That is our epidermal water barrier. It's formed from the process we just discussed, as well as the tight junctions between the keratinocytes. That helps to prevent dehydration. It keeps fluids in the body. It doesn't prevent the absorption of water by the stratum corneum. When we soak in the tub, you end up with pruned fingers, but it does keep water in. Beneath the epidermis is the dermis, which is a connective tissue layer between 0.2 and 4 millimeters thick. It's composed mainly of collagen. It also contains elastic and reticular fibers. It's well supplied with blood vessels, sweat glands, sebaceous glands, and nerve endings. Houses hair follicles and nail roots, the muscles of facial expression attached to the dermis. It has a wavy, conspicuous boundary between the dermis and epidermis, which, as they move upward, become dermal papillae. And those dermal papillae give rise to the epidermal ridges. The dermis has two layers, a papillary layer and a reticular layer. The papillary layer is a thin zone of areolar tissue in or near the dermal papillae. It allows for mobility of leukocytes and other defense cells, and it is also rich in small blood vessels which provide nutrients to the epidermis above. The reticular layer, the deeper, thicker layer of the epidermis, is composed of dense, irregular connective tissues. Here we have stretch marks, sometimes called striae, where are tears and collagen fibers caused by the stretching of the skin, sometimes due to pregnancy, sometimes due to obesity. Damaged dermal blood vessels from burns and shoe friction can cause serous fluid to seep out and form a blister between the dermis and the epidermis. So here's the dermis. The hypodermis, or the subcutaneous tissue, is the layer of connective tissue beneath the skin. It has more areolar and adipose tissue than the dermis. It acts as a pad for the body, binding the skin to the underlying tissue. It's also a common site for drug injection because there are many blood vessels there. Again, hypodermic needles are targeting this region, that layer. Subcutaneous fat refers to the subcutaneous tissue that is comprised predominantly of adipose tissue. Can serve as an energy reserve. It is thermal insulation, tends to be thicker in women and thinner in infants and the elderly. Skin grafts are adding a graft of tissue, a graft of skin, to an area that has skin removed. This is the consequence of third-degree burns or other skin injuries. If that graft comes from another location on the same person's body, it is called an autograft. You take a skin slice from one part of the body and move it to another. There's no danger of rejection in that case. An allograft would be a tissue from an unrelated person. Those are generally obtained from deceased organ donors. And an allograft, you do have to worry about tissue rejection. There are a number of artificial lab-based approaches under development to come up with ways to do skin grafts without requiring a source of skin, human skin anyway. Skin color is due to the dark eumelanin and reddish-brown pheomelanin. Eumelanin varieties include black and brown. They're responsible for tan, brown, and black skin. Pheomelanin is responsible for the yellowish to reddish tones in some Asian, Native American, and the pinkish tones of white skin. But it's all down to what forms of melanin there are. There are other contributing factors: the degree of show-through of dermal vessels and white collagen, possible accumulation of carotene pigment from yellow and orange vegetables. Ultraviolet radiation stimulates melanin synthesis. People of different skin colors have the same numbers of melanocytes, but they vary in their melanin production and how long it lasts. Darker skin, melanocytes produce a greater quantity of melanin. The melanin breaks down more slowly. Melanin granules are more spread out in the keratinocytes. In lighter-skinned individuals, melanin is clumped near the keratinocyte nucleus, and little melanin can be seen beyond the stratum basale. Skin color has diagnostic values. There are some terms you should be aware of. Cyanosis is a blueness due to oxygen deficiency. Erythemia is a redness due to an increased blood flow to the skin. Pallor is a paleness due to decreased blood flow to the skin. Albinism is a white skin due to a genetic lack of melanin. Jaundice is a yellowing of the skin due to bilirubin in the blood. It can be caused by compromised liver function. A hematoma is a bruising. That would be clotted blood under the skin. Here we have albino skin and jaundice skin. Skin has a variety of markings. We have friction ridges that are on the fingertips and leave oily fingerprints. Everyone has a unique pattern. It's formed during fetal development, remains unchanged throughout life, so not even identical twins have identical fingerprints. They enhance fingertip sensitivity and they improve grip. There are also flexion lines or creases, the lines on the surfaces of the fingers, palms, the wrist, and the elbows mark sites where skin folds during flexion of joints. The skin is bound to deeper tissues along those lines. A freckle would be a flat melanized patch. A mole or nevus is an elevated melanized patch, often with hair. Should be watched for changes in color, diameter, or contour that might suggest cancer. Hemangiomas are birthmarks that are patches of discolored skin because of benign tumors of the dermal capillaries. Some disappear in childhood, others last for life. Capillary hemangiomas, a strawberry birthmark, cavernous hemangioma, a port wine stain are some examples. Your hair, nails, and cutaneous glands are accessory organs or appendages of the skin. Hair and nails are composed of mostly dead keratinized cells. They are pliable, soft keratin, different than that in the skin. That is what is in the skin, the soft keratin, whereas in the hair and nails we have a compact hard keratin. Tougher, more compact due to numerous disulfide bridges between the keratin molecules. Hair is also called a pilus or pili, a slender filament of keratinized cells growing from a tube in the skin called a hair follicle. Hair covers most of the body. Hair does not cover your palms, soles, palmar, plantar, lateral surfaces, distal segments of fingers and toes, lips, nipples, and parts of genitalia. Limbs and trunks have 55 to 70 hairs per square centimeter. The face has about 10 times as many. There are approximately 100,000 hairs on the average person's scalp. The difference in hairiness across individuals is mainly due to differences in texture and pigment of the hair. There are 3 types of hair. Downy hair, or lanugo, which is a fine, downy, unpigmented hair that appears on the fetus in the last 3 months of development. There are vellus hair, which are fine, pale hairs that replace lanugo by the time of birth. 2/3 of hair on women, 1/10 of the hair on men, and all hair on children except eyebrows, eyelashes, and scalp hair. Terminal hair is the longer, coarser, more heavily pigmented. It composes the eyebrows, the eyelashes, and most of the hair on the scalp. After puberty, it also forms in axillary and pubic hair, male facial hair, and some of the hair on the trunk and limbs. Structure of hair has a shaft, which is the portion above the skin, and a root portion below the skin. In dermis or hypodermis, hair root ends with a dilated bulb. The bulb grows around the dermal papillae, which is a bud of vascular connective tissue providing nutrition to the hair. The matrix is a mitotically active group of cells immediately above the papillae. That's where the growth center is for hair. Each hair has 3 layers, a medulla, a cortex, and a cuticle. The medulla is the core of loosely arranged cells and air spaces. The cortex makes up the bulk of the hair. It's the layers of elongated cells. And the cuticle is the outermost region, consists of multiple layers of thin, scaly cells that overlap like the roof shingles or the scales on a reptile at a microscopic level. The follicle has 2 principal layers, an epithelial root sheath, which is an extension of the epidermis lying next to the hair root, widened deep into a bulge, a source of stem cells for follicular growth, and a connective tissue root sheath, which is derived from dermis, but a bit denser, surrounding the epithelial root sheath. Associated with that follicle is a sensory nerve fiber that entwines each follicle and responds to hair movements, and a smooth muscle known as a erector muscle, which attaches to the dermis and contracts to make the hair stand on end, known as piloerection, commonly referred to as goosebumps. Color of hair is due to pigment granules in the cortex. The brown and black hair is rich in eumelanin. Red hair has a high concentration of pheomelanin. Blonde hair has an intermediate amount of pheomelanin and very little eumelanin. Gray and white hair have little or no melanin. It's air that's present in the medulla. Texture is related to cross-sectional shapes of the hair. Straight hair is round, wavy hair is oval, curly hair is relatively flat. You can see the different variations here. Hair follicles go through 3 developmental phases called the hair cycle. The anagen, or growth stage, lasts between 6 and 8 years, and about 90% of scalp follicles at any given time are in this anagen phase. The stem cells are multiplying. The root sheath cells above the papillae form hair cells of the hair matrix. Hair cells make keratin and dye as they are pushed upward. There's a catagen phase, which is a degenerative stage lasting 2 to 3 weeks. Mitosis in the hair matrix ceases. Follicles shrink. Hair loss. Anchorage. Hair loses anchorage. Base of the hair keratinizes into a hard knot called a club hair, and it's easily pulled out by brushing. And then there is a telogen phase, which is a resting stage for 1 to 3 months, and then the cycle continues. We lose about 50 to 100 hairs daily. Hair growth rate is 1 millimeter per 3 days until we reach the age of 40. As we get older, a higher percentage of follicles are in the catagen and telogen phases. The follicles shrink and produce wispy vellus hairs. Alopecia is the thinning of the hair or baldness. Pattern baldness or androgenic alopecia, hair is lost unevenly rather than thinning uniformly. It's a combination of polygenic inheritance, hormone effects, and environmental influences. Hirsutism is an excessive hairiness in areas that are not usually hairy. Hair function is determined by its body region and its makeup. Hair receptors alert us of parasites crawling on our skin. Hair on our trunk and limbs is mostly vestigial. Scalp hairs retain heat and protect against sunburn. Pubic and axillary hair signify sexual maturity and aid in the transmission of sexual sense. Guard hairs or bursae guard the nostrils and ear canals. Eyelashes and eyebrows enhance facial expression and nonverbal communication. On to nails. Fingernails and toenails, clear, hard derivatives of stratum corneum. They are composed of thin, dead cells packed with hard keratin. They improve grooming, picking food apart, and other manipulations. They provide a counterforce to enhance sensitivity of fleshy fingertips to tiny objects. Nail itself is made up of a nail plate, which is the hard part of the plate, includes the overhanging free edge and nail body, the nail root underneath the overlying skin. Surrounding the skin rises as a nail fold, separated from the margin of the nail plate by the nail groove. The nail bed is underlying the nail plate. The hyperkynium is the epidermis of the nail bed. The nail matrix is the growth zone at the proximal end of the nail. Its thickness obscures the underlying vessels and makes it appear white, and we call it a lunula. The cuticle or epichylium is a narrow zone of dead skin that overhangs the proximal end of the nail. The appearance of nails can be valuable in medical diagnosis, swollen club fingertips, and oxygen deficiency. Dietary deficiencies can be seen in nail changes. Sweat glands. There are 2 types of sweat glands, apocrine and eccrine. Apocrine sweat glands are found in the groin, anal region, axillary, areolar, beard area of men. Ducts lead to nearby hair follicles, produce sweat that is milky and contains fatty acid. Apocrine glands are inactive until puberty. They respond to stresses and sexual stimulation. They're believed to secrete sex pheromones, chemicals that can influence behavior in others. That is still rather controversial as far as I understand it. Bromhidrosis is a disagreeable body odor, usually inadequate hygiene. It's not the secretions that smell, it's the things that like to grow in those secretions that smell. Eccrine or American glands are sweat glands. The sweat glands, the eccrine, American sweat glands, are the most numerous skin glands. There are about 3 to 4 million in adult skin. They are especially dense on the palms, soles, and forehead. They are simple tubular glands producing a watery perspiration that helps to cool the body. There are also myoepithelial cells found both in apocrine and eccrine glands. These have the ability to contract in response to stimulation by sympathetic nervous system and squeeze perspiration up the duct. Sweat is about 99% water. It has a pH range between 4 to 6, giving us that acid mantle on our skin, and bacteria does not like to grow in acidic conditions. Begins as a protein-free filtrate of blood plasma produced by the deep secretory portion of the gland. Some sodium chloride is reabsorbed by the duct, but some sodium chloride and other small solutes, potassium, urea, lactic acid, ammonia, remain in the sweat. Some drugs are also excreted in sweat. We have insensible perspiration, which is not noticed, does not produce visible wetness of skin, and on average we lose about 500 milliliters a day through this. Diaphoresis is sweating with the wetness of the skin in response to heat, exercise, or circulatory shock, and we can lose up to a liter or more of sweat per hour during strenuous exercise. Cutaneous transpiration is water lost from the skin, not due to sweating. Water diffuses between the keratinocytes and evaporates from the skin surface. Sebaceous glands produce oily secretion called sebum. Their structure is a flask shaped with short ducts opening into hair follicles. They have a holocrine secretion style, which we discussed last week. They keep skin and hair from becoming dry, brittle, and cracked. Ceremonious glands are modified apocrine glands found only in the external ear canal. They are coiled, simple tubular glands. They produce cerumen, more commonly referred to as earwax, which is a yellow waxy secretion combined with sebum and dead epithelial cells. Keeps the eardrum pliable, waterproofs the ear canal, helps to kill bacteria, and it makes the guard hairs of the ear sticky to help block foreign particles from entering the auditory canal. Mammary glands are milk-producing glands that develop in females during pregnancy and lactation. They are modified apocrine sweat glands. They rich secretion released through ducts opening at the nipple. Mammary ridges or milk lines are 2 rows of mammary glands in most mammals. Primates kept only 2 glands, but a few people have additional nipples along the milk line. Polythelia. Most skin cancer is caused by exposure to ultraviolet radiation from the sun or tanning beds, most often on the head, neck, and hands, most common in fair-skinned people and the elderly. One of the most common, most easily treated cancers, has the highest survival rates if detected and treated early. There are 3 types of skin cancers named for the epidermal cells from which they originate: a basal cell carcinoma, squamous cell carcinoma, and a malignant melanoma. Basal cell carcinoma is the most common type. It is also the least dangerous type because it's seldom metastasized. Forms from cells in the stratum basale. It's a small, shiny bump with central depression and beaded edges. Squamous cell carcinoma arises from keratinocytes in the stratum spinosum. The lesions are usually on the scalp, ears, lower lip, or back of the hand. They tend to be raised, reddened, scaling in appearance, forming a concave ulcer. There is a good chance of recovery if you get early detection and removal. They do have a tendency to metastasize to lymph nodes, at which point they may become lethal. Melanoma arises from melanocytes. It accounts for less than 5% of skin cancers, but it accounts for most of the deaths from skin cancer. It can be successfully removed if caught early, but it's usually fatal if it has reached the point of metastasis. There's a greater risk factor if you have a family history. It's a higher incidence in men, redheads, and people who have had severe sunburns as a child. Burns can result in death due to fluid loss, infection, and toxic effects of eschar, the burn dead tissue. They're classified according to the depth and tissue involvement. A first-degree burn only involves the epidermis. Typically red, slight edema, and pain. Usually heals on its own within days. A second-degree burn, or partial thickness burn, involves part of the dermis. It appears red, tan, or white. It will have blisters and be extremely painful. It takes a couple of weeks to several months to heal, and sometimes scars result from second-degree burns. Third-degree burns are full-thickness burns. They involve all the dermis and sometimes some of the deeper tissues. They often require skin graft, definitely need fluid replacement, infection control, and supplemental nutrition. UVA and UVB are improperly known as tanning rays and burning rays. Both initiate skin cancers. There is no such thing as a healthy tan. Sunscreens protect you from sunburn, but unsure if they provide protection against cancer. The high SPF numbers might give you a false sense of security. There are also potentially chemicals in sunscreens that may damage DNA and generate harmful free radicals. Skin color variations due to evolutionary selection pressures as humans migrated from Africa. Skin protects itself from excessive ultraviolet radiation. Brown and black skin today have an SPF of 10 to 15. White skin is closer to 2.5. UVR can be damaging, sunburn, cancer, degradation of folate, but also offers a benefit of stimulating vitamin D synthesis, so there's a balance. Skin color in response to migration reflects a compromise between the need for folate and vitamin D. Near the equator, in latitudes where UVR is the strongest, it's a benefit to have dark protective skin. Further north or south, where the light is weaker, it's a benefit to have lighter skin. All right, that's our first body system.